ABBA! The band that made Heartbreak sound like a glitter explosion and turned divorce into a chart-topping hobby. These weren't just musicians. They were walking disco balls with emotional baggage and matching jumpsuits. Two couples said, "Let's start a band," and somehow forgot that mixing romance, money, and choreography is a recipe for a Swedish soap opera with a soundtrack. They gave us global hits, a hologram concert that cost more than the moon landing, and lyrics that sound like they were written during a glitter overdose. One of them even dated her own stalker. Another got roasted for rhyming diddle with fiddle. And together, they built a legacy so shiny it blinded Sweden itself. So plug in your lava lamp, brace for sequined chaos, and let's boogie through the drama, delusion, and delicious dysfunction of pop's most polished mess. This is everything wrong with ABBA. Sorry to interrupt, but the winner takes it all. And by all, we mean full access to our videos. So what are you waiting for? Subscribe! Before they were ABBA. Okay, do you know what happens when two musician couples decide to start a band together? Drama, that's what. Before they were the shiny disco gods of the 70s, ABBA were just four Swedish people with bad hair and too much free time. Björn and Benny were already working together making music, and dating Agnetha and Frida made it super convenient to drag them into the band too. Agnetha had a solo career and a big voice. Frida was a singer too, with a very not fun backstory that involved her being the daughter of a Nazi soldier. Yes, really! More on that later. So two couples fall in love, make music together, and think, let's form a group. What could possibly go wrong? Spoiler, literally everything. But hey, they mashed their names together and became ABBA. Basically the IKEA version of a band. Romantic relationships, egos, and matching outfits. This was either going to end in global stardom or a televised breakup. Eurovision Madness. ABBA didn't just win Eurovision. They showed up like a disco grenade and blew the place up with glitter. Their song Waterloo was about Napoleon losing a war, which is exactly the kind of fun, danceable topic you want in a song competition. But here's what people forget. They almost didn't sing it in English. They recorded it in Swedish, English, and French, just to cover all the bases. The French version bombed, but thankfully the English one worked like magic. Still, the UK gave them 0 points. 0. Meanwhile, other countries were handing them trophies and glitter like candy. And guess what? ABBA won, obviously. And Sweden had to host Eurovision the next year. Except, a lot of Swedes weren't even happy. They thought ABBA was too commercial. Imagine getting mad at your own country's biggest success story. It's like being angry at IKEA for selling furniture. But one thing was clear. ABBA had arrived, and Eurovision would never be the same. Sweden's least favorite export. You'd think winning Eurovision would get you a hero's welcome, right? Balloons, cheers, maybe a parade with meatballs. But when ABBA returned home after their 1974 Waterloo victory, Sweden's reaction was more like meh. Critics thought they were cheesy, the media called them manufactured, and the music snobs? They acted like someone had replaced the national anthem with a disco beat. For a country known for being polite, Sweden came down harder on ABBA than a meat tenderizer at IKEA. To be fair, Sweden in the 70s was all about serious music. Folk songs, deep lyrics, and anti-capitalist vibes. Then along came ABBA in Rhinestones, singing about losing a romantic battle like it was a dance party. The cultural whiplash was real. It took years before Sweden finally admitted, okay, fine, maybe they're icons. Until then, ABBA had to deal with the weirdest flex of all time. Being world famous everywhere except at home. Thanks, Sweden. Sid Vicious vomits. This really happened. Sid Vicious from the Sex Pistols, yes, the punk guy who looked like he hadn't bathed since birth, actually met ABBA in 1977. He was drunk. Like, very drunk. So drunk, in fact, that when he saw ABBA dressed in their perfect white fur coats, his body said, "Now's a good time to throw up." And he did, right next to them. Imagine ABBA, The cleanest, sparkliest people in Sweden, standing there horrified while Sid Vicious paints the floor with whatever he had for breakfast. The punk world and the pop world were not supposed to mix. And this is why. Sid's version of a fan meeting was basically a biohazard. ABBA never said much about it, but come on, how do you even recover from that? Nice to meet you too, Sid. Hope your stomach enjoyed the show. Honestly, it was the most punk thing he ever did. And probably the grossest thing ABBA ever saw. Oops, we forgot to sing. Nothing says professional pop group like forgetting how lip syncing works. In 1976, ABBA was performing Knowing Me, Knowing You on a fancy TV show when, whoops, the backing track glitched. You'd think a global music act would at least know how to fake it, but the tape skipped, and the illusion went down faster than Björn's marriage. Agnetha started laughing on live TV while trying to pretend nothing happened, and the rest of the band stood there like mannequins in a disco museum. This wasn't just a tiny hiccup, it was a full-blown, caught red-handed moment. Turns out, when your show relies entirely on a tape, all it takes is one hiccup to turn your polished act into karaoke night gone wrong. It was the most glamorous train wreck ever aired on Swedish television, and honestly, watching ABBA panic mid-glitch is one of the most relatable things they've ever done. Even superstars have off days. Or in this case, off tapes. Hooking up with a stalker. Imagine your #1 fan moves into a forest hut down the street just to accidentally bump into you on walks. In the late 90s, Agnetha Feltskog found herself the unwilling star of The Bachelor Creep Edition. A Dutch fan, let's call him Mr. Yikes, a forklift driver from the Netherlands, had been obsessed with her since ABBA's 1974 Eurovision win. And in 1997, he decided to take that obsession to Olympic levels by packing his bags, moving to Sweden, and camping out just half a mile from her house like some discount Bond villain. Shockingly, they actually dated for 2 years. Why? Because sometimes stalkers pretend to be charming until they start loitering at your mailbox and calling you 3 times a day like it's customer service. When Agnetha ended things in 1999, Mr. Yikes lost whatever chill he had left. He trespassed on Christmas, violated restraining orders, and had to be deported like a disco-era cockroach you just couldn't squash. But wait, it gets worse. In 2003, he came back. In 2023, he got his own documentary where he basically said, "This isn't over. It's been 25 years. You're not in a love story, you're in a lawsuit." And now, he's been spotted vacationing in Sweden again. Translation, he's back, pretending it's just a coincidence. Yeah, right. Meanwhile, Agnetha just wanted peace and maybe a quiet life. What she got was the longest-running episode of Why Is This Man Still Here? Fame has its price, and sometimes it shows up with binoculars, a camera crew, and zero self-awareness. Benny's boozy broadcast. What happens when you give Benny Andersson a microphone and a bit too much schnapps before a TV interview? You get one of the most awkward ABBA moments ever caught on camera. In a late 70s Swedish broadcast, Benny showed up. Not sober, not even close. He slurred his words, rambled about fame, and looked like he'd just woken up from a nap under a piano. The interviewer tried to keep things together, but Benny was clearly deep into after-party mode. Fans didn't know whether to laugh or cringe, or both. The clip resurfaced years later, and it's now a favorite among people who enjoy watching pop stars, forget what planet they're on. For a group known for looking like flawless, glittery robots, Benny's Tipsy detour into realness was both hilarious and kind of tragic. It's the moment you realize even ABBA had their "Why am I like this" nights. And Benny? Benny was leading the charge, one drink at a time. Skål to mig fan, Benny. The Great ABBA. Tax escape. You know you've made it big when the government comes knocking, not for autographs, but for audits. In 1982, just as ABBA was wrapping up their reign of sparkly domination, Swedish tax authorities decided to investigate the group for drumroll, tax evasion. The accusation? that ABBA was funneling boatloads of disco cash through offshore companies to dodge paying taxes at home. Classy. Turns out, even when you're dressed like a cosmic peacock, you still want to keep that sweet, sweet krona. The case never went full courtroom drama, but it sure caused enough headlines to make their accountants sweat through their suits. Eventually it was settled, which is rich people speak for, "We made this go away without admitting guilt." So while Sweden danced to Mamma Mia, the IRS of the North was busy doing the cha-cha through ABBA's bank accounts. Moral of the story? Even pop royalty has to deal with tax drama, especially when their money's taking a world tour of its own. Money, money, gone. ABBA made millions. ABBA also lost sleep trying to figure out where the hell those millions went. Enter Polar Music, their own record label, which should have been a fortress of financial security. Instead, it became the musical version of a leaking piggy bank. In the 1980s, reports surfaced that the label was, let's say, creatively investing their profits into complex schemes that confused even the band members. There were disputes over shady deals, hidden earnings, and the kind of paperwork that makes even lawyers cry. For a group that sang about money, 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 it turns out nobody was actually watching the money. It was like a glitter-covered financial soap opera. The result? Tension, suspicion, and a whole lot of accountants quitting mid-sentence. If you thought ABBA's biggest breakup was between the couples, think again. Their real heartbreak came with spreadsheets and legal letters. Turns out the music wasn't the only thing that was getting remixed. Manager meltdown. Let's talk about Stig Anderson, ABBA's longtime manager and part-time human calculator. He helped launch their career, write their songs, and probably calculate how many sequins they could afford. But in the 1980s, the friendship turned into a feud, specifically between Stig and Benny. Why? Because suddenly, everyone wanted credit for writing the hits. And Benny didn't love the fact that Stig's name was stamped on songs like Dancing Queen. Add in a healthy dash of profit disagreements, and it was ABBA's version of a reality show divorce. The tension got so spicy that it nearly tore the group apart for good. And here's the kicker. When money and egos collide in the music business, there's no glitter big enough to cover the mess. What started as a tight-knit team ended in icy silence and legalese. So, if you ever wonder why ABBA stopped making music after 1982, just picture Benny rage-quitting a spreadsheet while Stig slammed a gold record into a wall. Too capitalist for communists. You know you're doing something right when the Soviet Union bans you for being too fabulous. In the 1970s, ABBA's music was officially blacklisted in the USSR for spreading capitalist decadence. That's code for, this slaps too hard and might make people feel joy. The Kremlin wasn't about to let their citizens boogie to songs about love, freedom, or, heaven forbid, money. But you can't keep a good disco beat down. Bootleg cassettes of ABBA's hits flooded the black market, passed around like contraband candy. Somewhere in a Moscow basement, someone was secretly doing the Dancing Queen shoulder wiggle under threat of arrest. This wasn't just music, it was rebellion in bell-bottoms. The irony? While Soviet leaders panicked about sequins corrupting the youth, ABBA became even cooler for being forbidden. Congratulations, ABBA. You weren't just pop stars, you were banned substances, and nothing sells better than what you're not allowed to have. The Nazi Dad. So here's a plot twist darker than a disco with no strobe lights. In 1977, Anni-Frid Lyngstad found out her father was a Nazi. Not like my dad voted weird Nazi, but a literal soldier from Hitler's Lebensborn program. A weird baby-making plan to spread Aryan genes. Yep, Frida was the unintentional product of one of history's creepiest matchmaking schemes. She was raised believing her dad had died in the war, only to learn years later that he was alive and very much involved in some ethically horrific stuff. Cue international media going full tabloid tornado. It was a personal bombshell turned public scandal, with reporters treating it like the next ABBA single. Meanwhile, Frida had to process her identity being hijacked by history. It's one thing to find out your dad was a deadbeat. It's another to find out he was on the wrong side of World War II. ABBA sang Knowing Me, Knowing You, but this? Nobody saw this coming. Princess problems. In 1992, Frida pulled off the ultimate pop star plot twist. She married a real-life prince, Prince Heinrich Royce of Germany. Sounds romantic, right? Royalty meets disco, but not everyone was popping champagne. Swedish media and gossip goblins went wild, calling her a gold digger, a social climber, and basically ABBA's Meghan Markle, except with fewer corgis and more eye rolls. People didn't see a love story. They saw a press release and a tiara. To be fair, Frida had already dealt with childhood trauma, fame, a Nazi dad reveal, and a messy band breakup. So if anyone earned the right to marry a royal, it was her. But that didn't stop critics from questioning whether she was in it for love or for the castle. In the end, the prince died of cancer in 1999, and Frida faded from the spotlight. But the headlines stuck. ABBA might have conquered the charts, but even they couldn't escape royal drama. The breakup album that broke them. When your band is made up of two couples, here's some free advice. Don't divorce each other mid-career. But ABBA said, screw it, and did just that. Björn and Agnetha called it quits in 1979, and Benny and Frida followed with their own divorce in 1981. That means by the time ABBA released their last album, they weren't singing love songs. They were passive-aggressively sending musical breakup texts. By 1982, the band called it quits, citing exhaustion and creative differences, which is musician speak for, we can't stand each other anymore. So forget Fleetwood Mac. ABBA perfected the art of harmonizing through heartbreak. The reunion that took a lifetime. ABBA fans are the most patient people on earth. Why? Because they waited nearly 40 years for the band to drop a new album, and when it finally happened in 2021, half the fans were old enough to need hearing aids. The delays were legendary. Every year someone would whisper, "This might be it," and then nothing. Björn kept saying they wanted to get it right, which is Swedish for, we're busy overthinking every note. Meanwhile, the rest of the music world moved on, broke up, reunited twice, and launched NFTs. But ABBA still adjusting microphone levels. By the time the album Voyage landed, it felt less like a comeback and more like a spiritual event. The album was decent, but after decades of teasing, fans expected the second coming of Dancing Queen, not a cozy nostalgia trip. Moral of the story, if you're gonna take 40 years to make something, it better be more than meh. Otherwise, just re-release the gold album and call it a day. The man who hates his own trophy. You know you're over it when you win Eurovision and then spend the next 4 decades trashing it. That's Björn Ulvaeus for you. He's basically the guy who wins prom king, then spends every reunion talking about how lame high school was. After ABBA's 1974 victory, Björn slowly turned on Eurovision, calling it too commercial and saying they won mostly by luck, which is wild considering Waterloo blew up because of that win. That's like the guy from Subway saying sandwiches are overrated. Of course, Björn had a point. Eurovision has turned into a glitter-drenched reality show. Either way, Björn being salty about Eurovision is the musical version of forgetting where your royalty checks come from. Dum-dum lyrics. Björn Ulvaeus is a lyrical genius, except when he's not. And he'll be the first to admit it. Case in point, Dum Dum Diddle. Yes, that's a real ABBA song. And yes, those are the actual words. Björn once looked back at that lyrical gem and basically said, yeah, sorry about that. Apparently, the words were only written to rhyme, not because they made any sense. The song is about a woman who wishes her man would play her like he plays his fiddle. That's right, she's jealous of a violin. But hey, even geniuses have bad days. Or, in ABBA's case, they turn bad ideas into international hits. ABBA, proving that even nonsense sounds good if you add enough piano and sparkle. 140 million pounds for Digital Ghosts. In 2022, ABBA proved that not even the laws of time, space, or common sense could stop them from staging a comeback. But instead of just getting on a stage like normal humans, they dropped over 140 million pounds to perform as holograms. That's right, ABBA spent the GDP of a small country so they could shake virtual hips while the real ones stayed home sipping tea. And here's the kicker. It worked! The show was a hit and London made back 1.4 billion pounds. Which means, congratulations, you just paid a fortune to watch shiny digital clones of a band that retired when fax machines were still high-tech. Somewhere in a karaoke bar, a tribute band is laughing and crying at the same time. And the real ABBA, they didn't even have to wear sequins. Honestly, it's the greatest lazy payday in music history. And there you have it. ABBA might be a chaotic cocktail of drama, divorces, and disco, but somehow they made it all iconic. What do you think of ABBA? And what is your most favorite ABBA song? Let me know down below. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.